what surprises me maybe is the breadth of the things that you deal with. And I'll give you some examples. This actually happened, and it was a while back, but within probably a 10 or 15 minute period, I just remember one day, I started dealing with an animal control issue, and I don't remember if that was in person or a phone call, but then I did have a phone call immediately after that, and I was talking to like a Fortune 500 company that was interested in talking here and trying to give the pitch for the town, and then hung up on that phone call, and it was a pothole issue that I was dealing with, and it was in a very compact period of time. And being a car guy, I also use the analogy of shifting gears a lot, and mentally that's kind of what it's like all day long. Not necessarily every 15-minute period like that one, but there's just a large breadth of things that you deal with, from the very mundane things that people probably don't recognize that somebody in the mayor's seat deals with, to the ones that I think you would recognize, like trying to talk to big companies and doing those kinds of pitches. So that's kind of the drinking from the fire hose thing. Right. Fortunately, as time has progressed, how you learn to cope with that, or how I've learned to cope with that, is that I'm not in this all by myself. We've got an extraordinary city staff. It was a learning process to figure out, okay, who can I get help from to address this or that? And that's really where the analogy of drinking from the fire hose got a little bit more efficient over time, is just learning who I can lean upon to help solve some issues. There's just a whole lot more efficiency involved. I know now what I didn't know the first, especially few months of that job. And I was still learning when the pandemic hit, which was 10 and a half months into my term, and that changed nearly everything. So there's just a whole lot more efficiency at this point in knowing who to lean upon, and got some successes under our belt in terms of solving some problems, and a lot of unfinished work yet to be done in some of those issues. But it almost feels like a head start at this point, particularly now that hopefully the pandemic has started to wane a little bit, and you can start to see some of that in the rearview mirror, because the reality is that it's consumed about 3/4 of my term.
Absolutely.
And I'm very much looking forward to seeing that in the rearview mirror, like I once characterized that we would someday. And so I feel almost reinvigorated in that sense, because I don't have that saddle, the community and society saddled with that as much as it was. Everything from the deputy and city clerk to human resources, the water department and codes department, which is 90% of what our constituents interact with, is all going to be on that level, and you can literally walk from one counter to the other. And so I think that will make it a whole lot more constituent friendly for sure, and efficient for us to serve them. And I guess the other thing is we're gaining some space that we didn't have before. We really don't have in the current city hall even a conference room per se. You sat at that front table many times, and that's just in the open council chambers and with the sun glaring in and such. And it'll be nice to have an actual meeting space for 10 or 12 people, whether that's for internal use or if we're entertaining a company that's here to talk about locating their business here and that kind of thing. And then the last thing is the council chambers itself is going to seat 50 or 60 people as opposed to 20 or 25 at a stretch that it does now. And so I'm looking forward to that. But the people are going to be the same, so I don't think the jobs are going to change, but I look forward to that building serving the town for the next 100 years. Probably because I'm up here every day. I would be remiss if I didn't say I was proud of what's going on, has happened on the square, and what's getting ready to happen on the square, phase 2, which will start this summer with the pavement and the sidewalks and that kind of thing. So, but that's, I think, pretty obvious to most people. I think what's most exciting about it, though, is not necessarily what you see that may be self-evident in terms of an ice rink or the fountains, which are about to get fired up and that kind of thing. But, and I said this in the campaign, is that where you expect commerce and activity and liveliness to happen, you have to have a congregation of people. what most people don't readily understand, I'm not sure I understood it, frankly, before I was elected. The city, as far as the city of Marion, its only public gathering space that we own and control is the square. Yeah. The parks are owned by the park district, and that's a separate elected body that administers all the parks. So a lot of people don't recognize that, or maybe even sometimes confuse it. So this space out here really is what the city has, our property, and what we can control. And so we chose very deliberately to start there and see that radiate out, which I think will in the coming years. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see all that stuff happen, but I'm more excited because it has inspired, which I mentioned this before, all of these other private entities. I mean, there are millions and millions of dollars being spent on the square right now. Name the last time that's happened, and I'll grant that to you. That's been inspired, in my opinion, because of the plans that we laid out. It's impressive to me that a lot of it started really before we started undertaking those plans. That was a leap of faith on many of their parts. But as far as the congregation of people, it's a chicken and egg argument. For these restaurants that are coming in, the bakery, your business, the bank, anything, the art district over here, the Civic Center to thrive, even Salvation Army to thrive, you've got to be able to get enough people here, a critical mass, to allow that to happen. And it truly is chicken egg. Do you build it first and hope that people come, or vice versa? So case in point, I know on social media we got a lot of flack, or I got a lot of flack. People did not understand the ice skating rink. 6,000 people came and skated on that ice. 6,000. Most of them, the majority of them, were 17 and under. The reason that's important is because those folks usually bring along their families, right? They can't get here when they're 5. Sure. So there were really far more than 6,000 people, and I think most people recognize that because they could see it. We hope to recreate that with other activities that we have out here during the summertime. The holiday parade was fantastic, especially I thought for our first go-round with it. It was truly a hallmark moment, if I can borrow that turn of phrase. I just got a little chill on the back of my neck now. I love that stuff. I love all the city employees and those around the community that put all that together. It was quite an effort. But that's what we're trying to do, is get people here so that these businesses can thrive. So I think that's kind of my proudest accomplishment, but there are some others that did come to mind. One of them is very recent, which I think is going to have a profound impact on our community, is this establishment of a fixed route bus service. That may not come to everybody's mind as a proud accomplishment, but we worked on that for 2 years and are very thankful to Rides Mass Transit. The city has not invested any money in that other than us going to put some bus shells and things around over time. Very first day, 100 people rode that route. And I feel like that is a very important piece to our economic ecosystem, so that people that don't have access to healthcare, they don't have access to groceries or work, can get access to those things in a very economic way. And so maybe that doesn't come to everybody's mind as a proud accomplishment. I'm particularly proud of that one. And then lastly, I would just say we chose early on, starting in 2020, to establish some residential TIF districts. They're only called that because they're predominantly in the residential areas. There's not a difference between a residential or a commercial TIF district, the way that it functions. But the way that we're using it's very novel. And last time in the campaign, I was very passionate about these older neighborhoods that I didn't want to see left behind. We're just now starting to see some of the fruits from that by redevelopment in those areas, and then the money that comes into that TIF. We just announced a $200,000 allocation for $5,000 grants, so that people can use that for a variety of reasons to fix up their homes. And that's the first time, I think, that Marion's had a big, large program like that. And again, you're trying to create this virtuous cycle as opposed to a vicious cycle where people reinvest into their homes, and that inspires a neighbor to maybe fix up their home or do some landscaping. And so I think all of those things are great. Of course, I'm proud of, as you mentioned, what's going on. Just the fact that the mall has now sold, and I know people can't see it, but there's a lot of square feet inside of that thing, and it takes a lot of time to deconstruct, if you will, 300,000+ square feet. I think there'll be some news very, very soon on a lot of those efforts, and we'll be excited to share that when that time is right. But very proud of all that's going on there. I know patience is not my virtue, so I understand people are, maybe they can't see what's right around the corner, so maybe they're impatient too. It's going to be worth the wait, and I'm excited about it. There's nothing like that experience.
Nothing could have prepared you for it.
No, I don't think there was, or for anybody else that might have the office, and I know
there's no one you could call and ask for how.
Yeah, there was certainly an abundance of opinions on how to handle things, and that's for sure. And it was a scary time. It was very trying. Probably my worst day in office was the day. It just so happened that in 1 week we felt like we needed to lay some city employees off. And at my businesses, we also laid off a lot of people because we were closed. We couldn't even have people in the building and that kind of thing at a moment. Fortunately, that didn't last very long. But that was right at the beginning. I'm not sure I've had a worse week than that week. That was tough. It was tough for everybody that was impacted by those decisions, but it was also tough to make those decisions. So, like I said, fortunately that didn't last too long. And, without stepping through all the twists and turns of everything, maybe I'm just trying to think of positives through that, but really. So I've got this concept of Polaroids. If you think about those instant moments in time, what will I carry with me after office, and when this experience and any others? That's what I mean by a Polaroid.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I keep thinking of relative to the pandemic was what I think to be one of Marion's proudest moments. And that happened to be the Marion United fundraiser that happened. And just briefly, I got to touch on how that came about. So Josh Benetone and Jared Gravatt, who hadn't even opened Crown Brew. So talk about scary, you're in the middle of ripping that building apart and doing all that, and then that hits. So I think it was the week of the governor's shutdown order, and they asked to meet with me on a Sunday, and I came in and met with them. And they had this idea, but envisioned by people that were struggling to even start a business, to help out other businesses that were obviously going to be struggling. And that effort raised $200,000. I never did hear of another town that did anything like that, of that scale, and certainly nothing that quickly. Right. And what an amazing thing, in retrospect especially, to think of people. We were all scared. We were all terrified about our loved ones, our businesses. How are we going to feed our families? How does the city survive this? How does anybody survive this? And here's people that are using that energy in such a positive way. And so to me, that's going to be that Polaroid to take away from that. There's a lot of bad stuff and a lot of fear and a lot of crisis management that happened, for sure. And I hope we never, ever have to live through it again. But look at some of the positive things that came out of that whole experience. There's other examples. Remember the signs that popped up just spontaneously across town? We can do this. You're loved. You're important. Right. That was amazing. That was truly an amazing thing. I still to this day don't know who spearheaded all of that. But it was, that part of it was an amazing experience to be a part of, even if it was vicariously and seeing other people. That's actually where I get most enthused, is watching other people do all of these new things. I am very proud of Chief Fitz and really his entire leadership cadre. They're quite impressive individuals to talk to, and not being a law enforcement professional myself, I've learned a lot from them. They've been pretty innovative on their own in terms of for just one example, but this therapy canine unit, which we call Officer Gary, very, very popular as a therapy canine unit. And I believe that's done a lot of good in bringing a positive interaction with the community policing, if you will. Not just school children, but they visit nursing homes and churches and other places that give this really non-confrontational interaction, of course, with the police department. And I think that's been a very good program that they spearheaded. One of the proudest initiatives that I'm very proud of with the police department and the city council as a whole is being able to put a police officer in each school in the district. I think that is huge. That process started with a school resource officer in the high school. That was before I was elected, and that was when I was on the school board. I wanted to push hard for that. We jointly did that with the school district. School district has been wonderful to deal with in all of this, very, very cooperative and helpful and inviting in that. And I think that's so important. The obvious is true. I mean, we want police officers there to protect our children, our teachers, and our staff. But there's also these other opportunities that they have, again, to interact with a police officer in a very friendly, non-confrontational way that I think is really can be transformational from a generational standpoint. I hope that the vast majority of the community has good experiences with the police department, and I'm so grateful that that's starting at that young age. So yeah, there's a lot to be proud of with the police department. Also under Commissioner Barwick, his big concern still is and push is to add more police officers. We have found a way to do that. I'm proud of that. About 13%, if I remember right, more patrol officers. That's in addition to the school officers. This is patrol officers. We still need more, in my opinion. We're a growing city with lots of traffic issues and people that don't obey traffic signals and things like this. But I'm proud that, frankly, in a time when there's been lots and lots of calls to downsize police departments, that we've been able to do the opposite. I think we were starting from a pretty low number before, and I'm glad that we've expanded that. And that's very much to the benefit of our community. My view, again, I'm not a firefighting professional, but I have had the opportunity to talk to many that are and other mayors, and I can tell you that the fire department is looked at as kind of a gold standard in Southern Illinois, and that's not just because of the equipment what we have, but the people that we have that are all about it. I mean, you cannot find anybody anywhere that's more passionate about their profession. You know, you look at all of the blessings that Marion has, particularly for a town of our size, but blessings in and of themselves. Boyd Street Community Center, which we're getting ready to reinvest in a big way. I'm proud of that and excited to see what the board there and the staff down there can make of these new accommodations that we'll have. Also, particularly proud of the Senior Citizens Center. Jill has done an extraordinary job there, turning it into Club 60, which sounds like a marketing thing, but maybe it kind of is. But boy, you talk about a robust set of programs that are really benefiting some folks that needed it. And, you know, talk about, I hate to keep going back to the pandemic, but the Senior Citizens Center alone served like 35,000 takeaway meals, take-home meals during the pandemic. I wonder how some folks would have really thrived without some of those services. And boy, was that a logistical feat to do that for somebody for an organization that's really geared towards doing that on site and serving at tables. So that was wonderful. Boyd Street did a wonderful job with some meals like that as well. But the hub is robust and growing, and I'm just talking to somebody else this morning about all those diverse offerings at the hub. The pavilion is still also a crown jewel. I mean, there's really no place else to have these meetings and things like that. And you just start walking around mentally in this town and thinking what all the town has to offer, some of which, of course, the city provides, a lot of it the city provides. But there's just a whole lot to be proud of. Well, I'll be transparent with you. I didn't know the four I was going to vote for exactly until I got to the voting booth the last time. So that's the truth. And I struggled with my last one, just picking between two. So you're right. I have made my stance clear on this. I'm glad to have the opportunity to clarify that a little bit. I want to clarify first by saying I'm not against anybody else. It's not that. But for me to claim, you talk about getting a card on the mail, the things that the council has accomplished as a whole, for me to claim that solely as my doing would be disingenuous, completely false. I did nothing on my own. whether you like it or don't like it. You can either pat me on the back or slap me, either way, but we're all responsible for it. That's just the way that it works.
Yeah.
And you're right, I didn't know necessarily what I would be working with. I've known two of the council members were on the council before I got there. Two that have been elected weren't, obviously, and you just don't know how that's going to interact. I will say that we've got, I believe, a profound and robust respect for each other. I know there's some people that think we agree on things too often. I can tell you without any doubt and to a high degree of certainty that's not true. What they don't see is how every day, constantly, how we interact one-on-one, and we're constantly throwing ideas at each other. What's important to understand is that each of these commissioners statutorily have a huge chunk of the city business that they are primarily responsible for. We talked about Commissioner Barwick, for example. He is the public safety commissioner, and what that means is fire and police. It's an enormous part of it. He just so happens to be a retired Illinois State police officer, which is why I appointed him when it was time for that position. That wealth of experience and background is priceless, and he's just done an extraordinary job, in my opinion, navigating that. And no, I don't want to lose that. Doug Patton, I think that's the next alphabetical one. He's the Commissioner of Finances. Needless to say, I would think that should be self-evident how important that is in the city. So, just state the obvious. Even during all this pandemic, our city reserves, and what that means is our savings account. If you think of your checking and your savings account, the money that you are left, you don't spend, our reserves have doubled in this last 4 years. We're able, through Doug's leadership, to invest that money, which means the interest that we'll get off of that over time will help do these projects and the things that we need to do without raising taxes and these kinds of things. We've also slashed our debt in that time frame. It's almost I couldn't have imagined a more perfect financial scenario, frankly, than that. And Doug's been in charge of that. He's also, maybe even to a fault, and I don't want to fault anybody, he has got this extraordinary attention to detail that he is really quick to find an improvement to this or a flaw in that, but that's all been good. It's all, whether that's the budget process or any other process that we've been dealing with. So no, I don't want to lose that. John Stecklin is the commissioner of basically the water and the sewer departments. Boy, you want to talk about something that people don't think about until something bad happens, on either way. But what a huge, important part of our city's business, not just revenue-wise, but just what we're supposed to provide to people. One of the challenges that the city has faced, as many individuals are facing or going to face, is these extraordinary electric costs that's going on. The sewer department, in particular, is our largest consumer of electricity, as you can imagine. And through Brent Kane and his leadership of that department, as well as Commissioner Stecklin, they really spearheaded this effort to put a solar array down there. We've got some land. That's the good thing. That's what it requires to have a large enough solar array. But they worked with vendors in such a way that for $0, the city's not going to invest $1 in this. And over the next, that will basically pay for all of our electricity, if you think of it that way. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's functionally mathematically the way it's going to work. It's going to save over $5 million over the next 20 or 23 years, I think. That wouldn't have happened without him pushing for it. And John, just so I jokingly call him the Commissioner of Entertainment. And what I mean by that is all these things we've done, which we previously mentioned, like the parade or
4th of July.
4th of July, he's big on that, has been with the Knights of Columbus and everything. He has got this uncanny knack to think of something that nobody else thought of on how to improve it and make it more attractive for people to do.
DJ side, yeah.
I think that must be that side. So that's been a huge help. He's just this consummate idea guy. And I really appreciate that so much, over these last 4 years. And then lastly, just because of alphabetical order, is Commissioner Jim Webb. You got to understand Jim's background is an engineer.
Yeah.
and he was a former highway superintendent for the county. Just so happens that I appointed him as street and cemetery commissioner, and for obvious reasons. That has really been a benefit to the street department because of that engineering background, just knowing what's what and all the different things that hit us with those issues. And in addition to that, he's got a passion, as I do, for cleaning up the town, and the street department is our resource for doing that, and I think that's been very, very appreciated by most people in town. So to a person, every one of these guys has just done an extraordinary job. For me not to support them would be disingenuous in my opinion. Cody is just an extraordinary man. I don't know how else to put it. I might not be able to do my job without his help. I certainly wouldn't enjoy my job nearly as much without his help. He's just an extraordinary young man and a friend at this point too, confidant, and I could not be more proud. There's several individual decisions that I've made that I would point to as critical since I've been mayor, but there's not been any that have been more critical than that one. And what a win for Marion, Illinois, to have Cody working for the city. And I hope people appreciate that. I know I certainly do. Well, there's definitely some things I can't quite share yet, but what I will say is relative to that is that, so yes, it's going to be much more of the same. We're going to continue to clean up the city. We're going to continue to try to find novel ways of reinventing this, that, or the other. That's not going to change. What is interesting about economic development, in my opinion, when we look at bigger picture issues, you talk about the FedExes that came in here, which I'm very proud of. Reader Link, a lot of people have forgotten that, but we had a very underutilized. Again, that wasn't a city-owned property, but people looked to the city to fill those kinds of facilities, just for the employment. We've done that. Reader Link is, for all intents and purposes, filled up that 1 million square feet, or soon will, and that's a huge book distribution center, nationwide book distribution. And so we're proud of those things, but and of course the Olive Gardens and things like that come, but what's fascinating about that is success attracts other success. It becomes, once you've got a few successes, it becomes actually disproportionately easier for those in economic development because it's self-evident. We can point to these other folks that these are. FedEx was a huge thing. I mean, that was a huge thing to land. As people gravitate towards success, it's that simple. Just like people gravitate when there's 6,000 people skating on the square. They're like, what's this all about? I want to be there. That looks like the happening place. So I think what you can expect, what I hope, especially with the pandemic in the rearview mirror, is you're going to see this virtuous and economic scale increase over time, I hope, these next 4 years, and I think we can look forward to that. I think the thing that probably surprised me the most is public perception of what a mayor can do or what they can't do. This may be a silly example, but there's been dozens of times, for example, I've been called by constituents wanting me to issue an order of protection or something because they've had a spat with somebody or whatever. And it's, I'm not a judge, as an example. There's been some instances where people want me to get involved and fix some legal problem they've had or whatever, and that's not the role of the mayor. So some of that stuff surprises me. I'm also, in a good way, very surprised by the number of good ideas that come from unexpected places. I've kind of made a habit, I'll tell you a little story real quick. I've made a habit for years about sweeping out here on the square. And what most people don't understand is I do that. I did that at first just to get out of City Hall for a little while and enjoy some sunlight and fresh air. But what is fascinating about that process is far more people talk to me when I'm out there than would ever think of stopping and coming in. I don't know if they're intimidated by City Hall or they're just busy, but just hundreds of people will stop and chat with me. And I love that because they always have either something that I need to pay attention to and fix. There's a lot of that. But a lot of times there's just a really good idea that comes out of there that we can actually execute. So, I love that interaction with people. I love that stuff. That surprised me a little bit. I did not expect that. And so that's why I've kept up with that in large part. The criticism and the social media and that stuff that you mentioned, that I guess that's just part of the job. And that is hard for a person to deal with. I will be honest with that. But I know what my mission is. I'm going to keep doing that mission as long as my wife will let me and the voters will have me. And that's the end of that. That's just, I think I know what I'm here to do, and I'm going to keep my nose down and keep doing it, pandemic or no pandemic. And, that excites me. It still fuels me. I'm still passionate about town. I think this is the most wonderful little town in Southern Illinois, and really any place that I've been to. And I'll keep screaming that from the rafters as long as I'm here. I just see opportunity everywhere. That's what I have such a hard time turning off. And I mean that in some bad things. I'll never look at a sidewalk the same way again. I can promise you that. I mean, I see every crack. I see every chunk out of stuff. And that's even when I've gone on vacation once, and my wife said, "What are you doing?" We were walking. I said, "I'm looking at this sidewalk." She's like, "That's not your responsibility." So yeah, I see lots of problems that I would have never seen before now that I've kind of got dunked into all of this, and that can be exciting and frustrating all at the same time. But I see as mayor, I see all these people that also have a love for this town, that feel empowered, maybe for the first time, to have a love for it. Maybe not everybody feels that way, but those that like what's going on, I think that's what's inspired some of them to take on some projects that it just never happened before. So the opportunity, the people opportunity here is, I feel like it's unbounded. How we continue to tap into that is the story yet to be told. But I think that's the part of being mayor that still just excites me every day, is that every day there's some new opportunity that can be made hay with. And I love that. I love that about our town. And I don't know if that exists in every other town or not. I really don't. How would I know? I never really lived anyplace else for a long period of time. But it's present here. I see it every day. And I love that about Marion. I'll always love that about Marion. There's so many. It's hard to pick just a few, but I think some of my favorite moments have been sometimes some kids in the community do something really neat, and that can be big kids or little kids. But I have these challenge coins that have been changing every year that the city has, and I sometimes get the opportunity to send one to a child that's won a spelling bee or something like that. And many times their parents will send back a picture, they've opened that card with that. And those are the kinds of things that stick in my head for whatever reason, because they've got a big smile on their face. Almost similar to that is, we've talked about it several times, but the ice skating, the looks on some of the kids' faces and the parents enjoying their kids were priceless. The extraordinary attendance we had, and smiles and comments about the parade being, "Oh my gosh, this is like a Hallmark movie." I love that stuff. It's very affirming to me. Is that what all the city is about? No. Do we have lots of things every day to work on? Without question we do. And we're going to continue to work on them. But those are kind of the things that sort of help sustain the harder moments. And because at the end of the day, I think we all have to recognize, I'm certainly recognizing, I'll be 53 this year, and I'm not that young of a man anymore. And even though I guess some people still look at me as the new guy, I'm not that young anymore. And what we have got to remember is that we have to engineer, if you will, and build this town for those that are younger than us, those that we can inspire to stay here and raise their families here. We should never lose focus of that. If we do, the town dies eventually, because we all have a shelf life. And if we only focus on what one demographic wants or another demographic wants, the town will suffer. And so I think that's why those comments are so affirming to me, because it tells me that we are becoming that town. As slow as that may be, as frustrating as that may be, those are the things that still fire people up. They make them proud to live here. And that's what we ultimately want. Not that I recognize some kids are going to leave, they're going to go on to bigger and better things. But having your kids want to stay and raise their family here is the biggest affirmation of being on the right track that there is. And so that's where we are going to continue to focus on, is how do we make Marion the right place, not just for people to enjoy now, but 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years from now. Those are the investments that we're making, and I hope we continue to make.